Hello film fans and welcome to this episode of the Sherlockian. Now it's been a while since I've talked about any dinosaur documentaries, and there had been one I've been meaning to talk about for quite a while. The ITV documentary March of the Dinosaurs. Now this was one of the very first all CGI dinosaur documentaries, and it's a bit of a weird one to review really. It's a kind of mixture between being very good and very bad, and hopefully I'm going to be able to explain this in this very quick review. First of all, it's a brilliant, beautiful looking documentary, I think it's fair to say. It's obviously, the overall plot of it is basically very similar to kind of March of the Penguins, which I think is where they got the vague idea of it from, at least the general overview. Basically, it follows a young edmontosaurus who's migrating from where now the North Pole is, down south into sort of Canada and America for the winter, in the same way kind of modern animals like, say, wildebeests migrate around seasonally, although I suppose a reindeer would actually be a better alternative to use considering the climate they're in the documentary. But that's the vague overview of the plot, and obviously it kind of looks at its trials and tribulations as it goes over, but it's much more than just looking at one species. It looks at a whole range of different kind of animal characters which you see throughout the documentary and see how they try and adapt and survive in the increasingly cold climate. Now, one thing I really like about this is it focuses on quite a unique aspect of dinosaurs, which is the fact that they also lived in sort of cold climates. Now, very few documentaries do this. Walking with Dinosaurs have done it in one of its episodes, and it also features in one episode of Prehistoric Planet, but apart from that, I don't think I've ever really met with any others that kind of look at it. And I have to say that on balance, I think I preferred the Prehistoric Planet episode to this one, but then that's not really a surprise because they had better CGI and it's more of a documentary format, and I think it's fair to say it's kind of aimed at a higher audience rather than this one, which is aimed at sort of casual viewers. But it looks gorgeous. It's got all these kinds of cold blues and whites, and you really get a sense of the kind of climate. And then as they go further south, you get a kind of range of kind of browns and greens coming in to kind of show how it's warming up. You really get a sense of kind of the temperature without obviously being able to feel anything. And the other thing I really liked about it is it looks at kind of unusual species of dinosaurs. So, for example, one of the other main animal characters is a troodon. I have seen some criticism of the troodon in this particular documentary series, and I'll come back to this a bit later, just more generally. But one of the criticisms is it's not feathery enough, and I think it's fair to say that they could have added a few more feathers, particularly around the face, where it's very scaly. But to be fair, at the time, showing feather dinosaurs at all was pretty innovative. I'm not saying it had never been done before, but certainly it must have been one of the first to move away from that kind of very traditional view of dinosaurs as being all scales and teeth. And it doesn't do a bad job of showing what a troodon looks like. I think it's not as good as the one in Prehistoric Planet again, but it's probably up there. The other thing I really enjoyed about it was it kind of shows things quite subtly. So, for example, there's an established trope to stay on the troodon topic for a moment. There's kind of a trope with kind of troodon and other kind of more raptory-like dinosaurs to show them as being very intelligent, as kind of cooperating with each other. And often they go to quite extraordinary lengths to show this. So, for example, to keep on the subject of Prehistoric Planet, in that it shows the troodon making fires, or rather starting fires, by kind of moving bits of burning bush to another area to kind of drive out small animals which you can then hunt. And as I mentioned in my review of that particular episode of Prehistoric Planet, this is actually established fact. It's been seen in Australia with particular types of birds of prey. But it is obviously a very unusual type of using intelligence. And I'm not saying it's stupid, but I am, because I really like that scene in Prehistoric Planet. But I do think that this does it more subtly. So, for example, you see the troodon learning behaviour. It watches its like older males displaying and then copies them. You can tell it's kind of learning just by the way it's looking at the other animals. You do see them cooperating, but it's kind of that it's not social cooperation. It's more kind of beneficial cooperation. So and my favourite scene in the entire documentary is where a ankylosaurus gets trapped on its back. in the snow, and then the Troodon come round and start to try and attack it. Obviously, it's much bigger than they are, but it's in a very weakened state from being on its back for 3 days, and you see them trying to get bolder and bolder and bolder, and they do kind of cooperate, but again, it's very much mutually beneficial rather than being a kind of social aspect to their behaviour. The other thing to go back to the sort of the topic of dinosaur designs, the one thing I do find quite fun is that it kind of mixes it up. So, for instance, I mentioned before it's kind of a mix of being very good and very bad. This particular documentary, and it is. So, for example, some stuff like the edmontosaurus and the Troodon are very good, but other things, like particularly their portrayal of tyrannosaurs, are very strange in this show. So, for example, it shows the main predatory villain, for want of a better word, is a gorgosaur, and it's it's a strange choice, really, because gorgosaurs, to put it bluntly, didn't live in that period, and I can see what they were going for. They were going for kind of like a Nanooksaurus kind of look. And it's certainly the way it looks, with kind of like feathers. It is very much in that kind of mould. So I don't really know why they didn't just call it that. There must have been some reason, surely, why they didn't, and I wasn't able to really find out why. But it just seems a bit odd. The other thing is, when you see an albertosaurus later on, it's exactly the same model. I don't know whether they just ran out of money for their CGI budget, but it's hilarious. They just pretty much copied and pasted and then changed the colour slightly. Now, to be fair, Gorgosaurus and Albertosaurus were very closely related in real life, so I suppose it's not, but it's not unreasonable to kind of use the same model. But I would have preferred if they just changed it a little bit. I mean, you could be fooled into thinking they were the same species. There's no difference really at all. The other thing which I did find slightly annoying about this documentary is, and it's a bit mean, I know, but it has a very enthusiastic narrator. Now, I have found apparently that in the English versions of this on ITV, the original broadcasts, this was actually Stephen Fry, and I think I'd have much preferred to hear his version of the narration, because the American version, which I found, is a bit annoying. It's got that kind of National Geographic thing where they have that really enthusiastic narrator who kind of sounds like he's just come back from a Batman trailer, and he talks like this all the time and says, now the Gorgosaur will press its advantage. That kind of thing, that really gravelly voice. And it's funny for about 5 minutes, and then after a while it kind of got on my nerves. However, overall, I did like this documentary. I don't think it's quite as good, and I must admit, it's been a little while since I've actually seen March of the Penguins, so I can't comment too much on the kind of comparison between the two of them. But I think overall, just from my memories of March of the Penguins, I think I prefer that. I mean, it's a bit unfair, obviously, because March of the Penguins is actually a proper documentary. It was obviously filmed in real life rather than them using the CGI. And the CGI in this is actually really, really good. I mentioned that before, but it is pretty fantastic, considering it was one of the first documentaries to really go for that kind of all CGI environment. It looks pretty nice. The only thing that I've really found annoying, apart from the fact that they kind of copied and pasted the big tyrannosaurs, is when the dinosaurs run, particularly the big ones, so again the big predatory ones, when you see them run, they kind of look very slow. You don't really get a sense of speed or power. They just look a bit lumbering. But apart from that, it's actually really nice, and it has a good use of kind of slow motion. There's some quite fun little scenes. Particularly, I like one bit when a Bertosaurus kind of leaps out, and you get a flash of lightning just behind it. There's another one where it sort of peeks out its head from behind a rock, and again the lightning flashes, and it's a little bit cheesy. But I did enjoy it. I thought it was quite fun. So yeah, overall, this is quite a good documentary. It's not the best dinosaur documentary I've ever seen by all means, but it's probably like middle tier. It's not as bad as, say, I don't know, some of the other things I've seen, and in fact reviewed on this channel. So yeah, that was my review of March of the Dinosaurs. I hope that was moderately interesting. If you enjoyed this video, then feel free to subscribe to the channel. I review a range of documentaries, and sometimes I look at the history behind drama series to kind of increase the enjoyment. And also, if you want to follow me on Twitter, you certainly can, and my handle's in the description below. But yeah, thanks for watching. And if you've got any other things you'd like me to review, stick them in the comments. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts. Anyway, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.